Welcome. Today's psalm is a psalm for someone in a truly desperate situation. So desperate that it feels to them almost as if God has forgotten about them, as if God has left them completely and will never return to them. Yet even in that situation, they can turn to God and know that there is help for them in God. Today we're looking at Psalm 13, that's 1-3. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. I present these talks on how to understand the King James Bible using the Psalms. Each week we look at a different portion of the Psalms and we go through the Psalm verse by verse and word by word, seeking to understand its meaning. So Psalm 13, it has the heading, To the Chief Musician, a Psalm of David. The fact that it's a Psalm of David tells us that King David wrote it. And when we read the history of David's life, we see that often he was in terrible troubles. Troubles such as when King Saul, the previous king, opposed him and tried to kill him. Or troubles like those when Absalom, his own son, staged a revolution against him. In these troubles, David looked to God. He didn't depend on his own resources. He didn't depend on his own ability. He depended upon God. And he wrote these psalms as memorials of these incidents and as a way to remember the way that God had helped him in these situations. And some of these psalms, like this one, he prescribed to be sung as part of the worship in God's house, the temple. That's the meaning of that phrase that begins the ancient title to our psalm, To the Chief Musician. He had written this psalm and he sent it to be used in the worship of God, the public worship of God, so that others could learn from his private lessons, from his private experiences, how they too can serve God even in the depths of trouble. So David begins in verse 1, How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord, forever? That's the first of a series of 4 how long questions in this psalm. And 4 in the Hebrew poetry had a significance. It's rather like you've got 4 sides to you, in front of you, behind you, to your left, to your right. So it's like as if something is surrounding you totally. In David's case, it was troubles that surrounded him on every side. And he asked the question, how long will this happen? How long will these troubles go on? But his greatest trouble was that God seemed to forget him. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? In other words, God wasn't acting on David's behalf, or at least not as far as David could see it. To David, these troubles had come against him, and although he depended on God, God wasn't thinking about him, or it seemed that way. Of course, God remembers his people. Of course, God knows the situation they're in. He knows about their troubles. He is eager to help them. But in their troubles, often it doesn't seem like that. Often they call to God for help, and no help seems to come. And there comes this situation, Martin Luther described it as hope turning to despair, and then despair itself beginning to hope. Because in despair he calls out to God, how long will you forget me? And he offers the answer, are you going to forget me forever? Is it that God will never act to help me? And yet in that despair there is hope expressed. Because David is also saying by this question, God, is it possible that you could have forgotten me, or the circumstances seem to say that. My troubles and the way that they're continuing seem to say that you've forgotten me. But is that possible? Surely there must be a limit, a time placed on this suffering, a time placed on these troubles. Surely the time must come, God, for you to act and to save me from my troubles. And when he offers the answer, or is it another question? Forever. Is it possible that God can forget his faithful people forever? Must there be a limit somehow that will save David from these troubles? David has prayed so much to God, and he knows that God is like a father who looks down on his people with favour to help them. And so he calls out to God, and he expects God to, as it were, turn his face towards David. But God's not doing that, and that's the reason for David's second "how long" prayer. The second half of verse 1, "How long wilt thou hide thy face from me?" I'm calling to you, God. I'm praying to you. I'm asking you to look to me and to meet me in the situation of my need. Surely you won't always look away. Can a mother forget her child? Can a father forget his son? Yes, perhaps they can. But God cannot forget his people. And if it seems for the moment as if God has hidden his face, as if God has turned away from them and will not give them the attention they so much need, they are sure that it cannot be permanent. How long? There must be an end to these troubles. David's third "how long" prayer comes in verse 2. "How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily?" Take counsel. Counsel means advice. So take counsel means take advice. Now David would go to his friends for advice. But here we've got him with no friend to turn to. So he takes counsel in his soul, inside himself. He's thinking through what plans he can possibly have to save him from these troubles. He's making up schemes and arrangements, but they are hopeless plans. They are stupid schemes. They are sure not to succeed. Maybe David's doing this by night. In verse 3 it talks about sleeping. Maybe deep at night David cannot sleep, and as he tosses and turns, ideas come into his mind. Foolish ideas, ideas that could never rescue him, that could never help him. What David needs is God to act. And these plans, these thoughts that go through his mind at night, well, they're not going to direct him to God. And so he wakes, and he wakes to find that there is deep sorrow in his heart. Deep within him, there is a sense of sorrow, because all his plans are futile. They cannot succeed. And daily, day after day, this happens to him. Night after night, he's thinking through his plans, his counsel. Day after day, he knows the sorrow that those plans will never succeed. What we ask is David's trouble. What could produce such a desperate response in his life? Why would he think that God's forgotten him? Why would he think that God's hidden his face? Why would he make up plans all through the night and then spend his days in sorrow at the failure of those plans? Well, David's last "how long" question tells us his trouble. How long shall mine enemy be exalted over me? Mine enemy. Today we would say my enemy. How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? To be exalted means to be in a high position, to be greater. My enemy has power over me. My enemy is greater than me. My enemy is sure to defeat me. And can this continue? Can this continue when I am a child of God, when I serve the living God and my enemy opposes and hates everything that belongs to God? Can it really be that God will allow this to continue? David turns to God. He's already expressing to God his prayer in these how long questions, but now a more direct prayer, a more direct petition to God, a request to God for help. Verse 3, consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Look at my situation. Listen to my prayer. You are the Lord, Israel's God. You are my God too, the God whom I serve, the God whom I trust. And this is what I pray to you, that you would lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lighten mine eyes, bring light to my eyes. This really does sound to be a prayer now, which is prayed deep in the night. And it's deep in the night because David's enemies feel like darkness all around him. And it's deep in the night because David is thinking about sleep and how similar sleep is to death. We lie down in sleep. We lie down in death. We lie down. We're unaware of the things around us in sleep. We're unaware of the things around us in death. There is one difference. When we sleep, then light will come to our eyes to wake us up for the new day. But when we are dead, our eyes are not lightened again. So David prays, lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest means so that this will not happen. Bring light to my eyes, so that it will not happen that I sleep in death. God, it seems like there's no hope for me in this world. It seems like all my plans or all your plans for my life must fail. But you can change that. You can change that with something as simple as the dawn arising at the beginning of the day. You can shine light into my life. Are you not the God who created the light in the beginning? And do I not need light? Darkness, in the word pictures of the Bible, it often speaks about trouble and difficulty. And light speaks about the knowledge of God and God's presence with us and his revelation in our lives. David prays for the light. Verse 4, lest mine enemies say, I have prevailed against him, and those that trouble me rejoice when I am moved. So God, I'm praying that my enemy will not be able to say, I've prevailed against him. Yes, my enemy has had success against me so far. Yes, he's powerful and he's increasing in power, and I'm weak and increasing in weakness. But I have a great God. And let me live in the strength of my God and not in my own weakness. May this enemy of mine, this enemy who opposes me, not succeed against me. And may those that trouble me not rejoice when I am moved. I put the word not in there just to make it clear that lest from the beginning of the verse applies to the second half of the verse. David could pray, may it not be that those that trouble me rejoice when I am moved. Those that trouble me, those that cause trouble for me, when I am moved from my position of safety, moved into a position of great danger. David was already in trouble. Maybe he was already in danger. But he means by I am moved, I am totally defeated. If I am totally defeated, then those that cause such trouble for me be joyful at that. They want God's king to fail. They want God's people to fail. They want God's people to be destroyed, to be separated from God, to be moved away from God, who is their protector and their defender. It would rejoice them to see God's people in such difficulty, God's people taken away from God. May that never happen, praise David. May it never happen. God, you only have to look. You only have to hear my prayer. You only have to bring light to my eyes to rescue me from this situation. And as I pray, David says, I'm confident. I've got a reason to trust, because I am not trusting someone weak. I am trusting the living God. And I have brought these prayers before God, who is more than able to rescue me, who is more than able to look after me, to bring me salvation in this situation. And so after this deep despair of verses 1 and 2, and after this desperate petition of verses 3 and 4, we have the deep joy, the full joy of the knowledge of David that God is answering his prayer in verses 5 and 6. Yes, David is joyful now. He's not joyful because his troubles have ended. We don't know whether his troubles have ended. Maybe those troubles are just the same to all outward appearances. Maybe his circumstances look just the same, but God has given David the assurance of an answer to his prayer. And so David can say in verse 5, "But I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation." Mercy, God's kindness. The Hebrew word is sometimes translated loving kindness. Sometimes it refers to God's faithfulness, the fact that God is true to his promises. David is trusting then in God's promises. Sometimes it refers to God's character, God's perfect goodness. David is trusting in the character of God. He knows God. He knows God's promises. He knows that God is the God who answers prayer. He knows that God is the God who shows kindness to his people. And David's trust is in God, the God who will not disappoint him. He declares, "My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation." David's heart. We had his heart appearing in verse 2. And remember the deep sorrow of his heart. "I have sorrow," he writes, "in my heart daily." Oh, but now that sorrow is taken away. For David can see the mercy, the goodness, the faithfulness of God. "My heart shall rejoice," he says, "in thy salvation." Salvation. The Hebrew word is Yeshua, the same as the name Jesus in the New Testament. If this were a New Testament verse, we might want to translate it, "My heart shall rejoice in your Jesus." My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. God, salvation is rescue and safety. God, you are the God who delights to rescue your people. You don't just rescue them, you bring them to a place of safety. They know safety in you. They find their safety that will not disappoint them. And if David's troubles have gone on for a long time, if they are so long that he prayed, "How long will it be? Forever?" The answer is no, because it is God's salvation that is forever. It is that God is sure to answer the prayers that are offered sincerely to him. How long will you forget me? My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. Yes, now David is rejoicing. He's even singing. Verse 6, I will sing unto the Lord, because he hath dealt bountifully with me. Oh, it's not enough for me to rejoice in my heart. Only I can hear when I rejoice in my heart. Let me sing with my voice, with the full strength of my voice, and let me sing to God, that all around might know the joy that I have in God's salvation, in God's mercy, in God's goodness. I will sing unto the Lord, because singing is more beautiful than speaking, and it's more beautiful than thinking. Singing, we use the full power of our voice, the full melody of our voice, to express the joy that is in our heart. Why are you so joyful now, David? David replies, because he, the Lord, hath dealt bountifully with me. The Hebrew word for dealt can mean dealt in a good way or dealt in a bad way. If we deal with those boys who are causing trouble, well, we probably mean that we're punishing them or we're telling them off. So the King James translators thought in this translation they have to make it clear the sense that David means he's been dealt with in a good way. So they wrote, he hath dealt bountifully with me. Bountifully means generously. God has been generous to me. God has been good to me. That's why David says, I will sing unto the Lord. Please write to me. My email address is 333kjv@gmail.com. It will be lovely to hear from you, to hear which part of the world you're in. A lot of the people who listen to this podcast are in the United States. So if you're in the United States, do please tell me which of the 50 states you live in. My email address again, 333kjv@gmail.com. And now here is the whole of Psalm 13. To the chief musician, a psalm of David. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord, forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long shall mine enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest mine enemies say, I have prevailed against him, and those that trouble me rejoice when I am moved. But I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord, because he hath dealt bountifully with me.